Human Waitress spotted a small detail that the alien king's generals missed. It saved his throne. The steel collar around Mara's neck hummed with a low, electric warning as she hurried down the marble corridors of the Zephyrian palace. Now, towering alien guards with their silver skin and glowing blue eyes watched her every move, their plasma rifles charged and ready. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact. Survive another day. These were the rules that had kept Mara Collins alive for the past 8 years since the Zephyrians had conquered Earth. At 24, she barely remembered the time when humans ruled their own planet, when the White House had been a symbol of freedom instead of alien oppression. The heavy silver tray in her hands contained the finest delicacies the palace kitchens could prepare: roasted meats from Earth's remaining farms, exotic fruits from the Zephyrian home world, and crystal goblets filled with wine that cost more than most humans earned in a year. All of it for the alien elite who saw her as nothing more than a walking serving dish. "Move faster, human scum!" barked Commander Waitress, his reptilian voice cutting through the air like broken glass. His scaled hand pointed toward the massive oak doors ahead, doors that once led to the Oval Office, now transformed into the War Council chamber. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. The War Council only met when something big was happening. Something that usually meant more human suffering. As the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, the familiar smell of fierce sweat from other human servants hit her nostrils. Inside the chamber, the alien King Zephyr sat on a throne made from melted human monuments, pieces of the Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore, and the Liberty Bell twisted together in a grotesque display of conquered freedom. King Zephyr stood nearly 8 feet tall, his crystalline skin shifting between silver and gold as emotions flickered across his alien features. Around him, 6 of his top generals hunched over a massive holographic map that floated above the central table, their clawed fingers pointing at various locations across what used to be the United States. "The human rebels have fortified themselves in the Colorado Mountains." General Varen's voice rumbled like thunder. He was the most feared of all the Zephyrian commanders, with battle scars covering his metallic face and eyes that burned like blue fire. "Our satellites show approximately 10,000 fighters hiding in underground bunkers." Mara set down the first tray near General Corax, careful not to look directly at the map. But from the corner of her eye, she caught glimpses of red markers, battle formations, and route lines crisscrossing the holographic terrain. "This rebellion has lasted far too long." King Zephyr's voice boomed, causing the wine glasses to vibrate. "Human resistance should have been crushed years ago. How do you propose we end this once and for all?" General Varen stepped forward, his chest plates gleaming with pride. "My king, I have developed the perfect strategy. We will march 3 divisions through the Rocky Mountain passes, here, here, and here." His claw traced glowing lines across the map. "The main force will take the northern route through Devil's Canyon Bridge, flanking their primary stronghold from behind, while our other units create diversions." Mara nearly dropped her second tray. Devil's Canyon Bridge had been destroyed in a massive rock slide 3 years ago during the early days of the human resistance. She knew because her father had shown her that exact route on his old paper maps before the aliens killed him for refusing to reveal human hideouts. The bridge was completely gone, nothing but a 1,000-foot drop into jagged rocks below. Her hands trembled as she continued serving, moving like a ghost between the towering alien figures. They discussed troop movements, supply lines, and battle tactics as if she didn't exist. To them, she was just another piece of furniture, invisible and insignificant. "The northern route is perfect," General Corax agreed, his voice like grinding metal. "The humans will never expect an attack from that direction. It's a blind spot in their defenses." "But there's no bridge," Mara screamed silently. "You're sending thousands of soldiers to march off a cliff." She set down another tray near the map, her eyes desperately searching the holographic display. There it was, a bright green line marking the northern route, leading directly to where Devil's Canyon Bridge used to be. The map showed the bridge intact, as if the rock slide had never happened. "Excuse me," she whispered, barely audible. None of the generals heard her. "Excuse me," she said louder, her voice cracking with desperation. Every alien head turned toward her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as 6 pairs of burning eyes fixed on her small frame. "What did you say?" General Varen's voice was deadly quiet. Mara's collar hummed more intensely, warning her that she was crossing dangerous lines. But she couldn't stay silent. Not when thousands of lives hung in the balance. "The northern route, sir. The Devil's Canyon Bridge. It's not there anymore. It collapsed 3 years ago in a rockslide. The map is wrong." The silence that followed was deafening. Then General Korax threw back his head and laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "The human thinks it can read military maps. Perhaps we should make it our new strategic advisor." The other generals joined in the mocking laughter. Even King Zephyr's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Stupid creature," General Varen snarled, stepping toward Mara with predatory grace. "Do you think our advanced Zephyrian satellites make mistakes? Our technology mapped every inch of this pathetic planet. A bridge cannot simply disappear." "But sir, I've seen—" "Silence!" Varen's roar shook the chamber. "One more word and I'll have you executed for insubordination. Return to your kitchen duties before I decide your life isn't worth the trouble." Mara's knees almost buckled, but she managed to bow her head and back away toward the door. As she gathered the empty trays with shaking hands, she caught fragments of their continued planning. "The attack begins at dawn in 3 days," King Zephyr declared. "The northern route will be our primary assault. This rebellion ends now." As the massive doors closed behind her, Mara pressed her back against the cold marble wall, struggling to breathe. Her collar had stopped humming, but her heart continued to race. 3 days. 3 days before thousands of Zephyrian soldiers marched straight into a death trap. 3 days before the aliens discovered their mistake and blamed the humans for sabotage. 3 days before every human in the palace, including her younger brother Jace, who had been conscripted into their army, paid the price for their commander's arrogance. She clutched the empty trays against her chest and whispered the words that would change everything. "They're marching straight into a trap." The human servants' quarters lay deep beneath the palace, in what used to be the White House basement bunkers. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, cheap soap, and desperation. Flickering fluorescent lights cast sickly shadows on the concrete walls where faded American flags had been painted over with Zephyrian symbols of conquest. Mara slumped onto her narrow cot, still clutching the empty serving trays. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mara? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lyra's voice cut through the quiet chatter of other servants. Her best friend sat on the next cot, mending a torn uniform with careful stitches. At 19, Lyra had the prematurely aged face of someone who'd grown up too fast under alien rule. "Worse than a ghost," Mara whispered, glancing around to make sure no other servants were listening. "I think I just witnessed a massacre in the making." Lyra set down her sewing and leaned closer. "What happened up there?" Mara told her everything: the war council, the map, the missing bridge, and the general's dismissive laughter. With each word, Lyra's eyes grew wider. "You tried to correct a Zephyrian general?" Lyra's voice was barely audible. "Mara, they execute humans for less than that. I couldn't just stand there and watch them march to their deaths." Mara buried her face in her hands. "My father would have done the same thing." The mention of her father made Lyra's expression soften. Everyone in the servants' quarters knew about Thomas Collins, though few dared speak his name aloud. "Tell me about the map again," Lyra said quietly. "You're certain the bridge is gone?" Mara reached under her mattress and pulled out a small, worn leather journal, the only possession she had left of her father's. Its pages were filled with hand-drawn maps, elevation charts, and geographical notes written in Thomas Collins' careful handwriting. "Dad was the chief cartographer for the North American Defense Coalition before the invasion," Mara explained, flipping through the yellowed pages. "He mapped every mountain pass, every river, every strategic location from Canada to Mexico. Look here." She pointed to a detailed sketch of the Rocky Mountains. Her father's precise notes marked Devil's Canyon Bridge with a red X and the date of its destruction. "Bridge collapsed, March 15th, 2157. Rock slide. Route impassable. He updated his maps constantly, even after the Zephyrians took over. Said knowledge was the only weapon humans had left. Mara's voice caught in her throat. The human resistance wanted him to join them, to use his maps against the aliens. But Dad refused. Why? Lyra asked. He said violence only brought more violence. That humans needed to survive, not throw their lives away on hopeless battles. Mara traced her finger over her father's handwriting. The resistance called him a coward. They executed him as a traitor in the town square, right in front of me and Jace. The memory still burned like acid in her chest. She'd been 17, holding her 12-year-old brother's hand as they watched their father die for refusing to choose a side in a war he believed no one could win. But now the aliens are using wrong information, Lyra said thoughtfully. If they march those troops into Devil's Canyon, they'll lose thousands of soldiers, Mara finished. And when they realize what happened, they'll blame human sabotage. Every servant in this palace will be executed as suspected rebels. A shadow fell across their conversation. Both girls looked up to see a young Zephyrian officer standing nearby, his silver skin gleaming in the harsh light. Unlike the scarred generals upstairs, this one appeared barely older than Mara herself, with curious golden eyes instead of the usual burning blue. Forgive the interruption, he said in accented English, his voice surprisingly gentle. I am Officer Kale of the 3rd Division. I could not help but overhear your conversation about the northern route. Mara's blood turned to ice. Had they been too loud? Would he report them to General Varen? Please, sir, we weren't, she began. Kale raised a scaled hand. Peace. I am not here to punish you. I am here because I have concerns about the battle plan as well. Both girls stared at him in shock. A Zephyrian officer doubting his superiors was unheard of. You mentioned a collapsed bridge. Kale continued, crouching down to their eye level. How can you be certain of this information? With trembling hands, Mara showed him her father's journal. Kale studied the maps with intelligent eyes, comparing the human notations to what he'd seen in the war room. Your father was very thorough, he said finally. These details match our satellite imagery perfectly. Except for Devil's Canyon Bridge. Then you believe me? Mara's voice was barely a whisper. Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his words chilled her to the bone. If you're wrong about this, they will execute you for treason and spreading false information. But if you're right... He paused. No one will thank you for exposing their mistake. Generals do not admit error. Kings do not reward servants who make them look foolish. But what about the soldiers who'll die? Mara asked desperately. What about your brother? Kale's golden eyes seemed to see straight through her. Mara's heart stopped. What? Jace Collins, recently conscripted, assigned to the 3rd Division Northern Assault Force. Kale's voice was matter-of-fact. He will be in the first wave of troops crossing Devil's Canyon Bridge. The journal slipped from Mara's numb fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Her baby brother, the same boy she'd held during their father's execution, the same boy she'd raised and protected for the past 8 years, would be among the first to march off that cliff. No, she breathed. No, they can't send him there. He's just a kid. He is a soldier now, Kale said quietly. And in 3 days he will follow orders to cross a bridge that no longer exists. Mara looked between Kale and Lyra, her mind racing. Stay silent and watch her brother die, or speak up and face execution as a traitor. Either choice could destroy everything she had left. The weight of an impossible decision settled on her shoulders like a stone. Dawn broke over the palace like a wound across the sky, painting the marble walls in shades of blood and gold. From her small window in the servants' quarters, Mara watched the final preparations for war with growing dread. The past 2 days had crawled by like a slow death. She'd served meals to the generals, cleaned their chambers, and listened to their confident boasting about the coming victory. Not one of them had reconsidered the northern route. Not one had questioned the map. Now, as alien war horns echoed across the palace grounds, reality was about to collide with their arrogance. "Mara, you need to see this," Lyra whispered from the doorway. Together, they climbed the narrow servant stairs to a maintenance balcony overlooking the main courtyard. What Mara saw there made her stomach twist into knots. Thousands of Zephyrian soldiers stood in perfect formation, their silver armor gleaming like scales in the morning light. Hover tanks floated in neat rows, their plasma cannons charged and ready. Transport ships hummed overhead, casting massive shadows on the assembled army. But it wasn't the alien war machine that made Mara's heart break. It was the humans. Scattered throughout the alien ranks were conscripted human soldiers, young men and women torn from their families and forced to fight for their oppressors. They wore modified Zephyrian armor that looked too big on their smaller frames, and carried weapons they barely knew how to use. "There," Lyra pointed toward the Northern Division. "Third row, near the command transport." Mara's eyes found him immediately. Jace Collins stood among the other human conscripts, his 19-year-old face trying hard to look brave under his oversized helmet. Even from a distance, she could see the fear in his posture, the same hunched shoulders he'd had as a 12-year-old watching their father die. Her baby brother. The boy she'd raised. The last family she had left. General Varen's voice boomed across the courtyard through amplified speakers. "Soldiers of the Zephyrian Empire! Today we crush the human rebellion once and for all! The northern route will deliver us victory!" A cheer rose from the alien troops, but the human conscripts remained silent. "The 3rd Division will lead the assault through Devil's Canyon," Varen continued. "By sunset, the Colorado stronghold will fly our flag, and human resistance will be nothing but a memory." Mara gripped the balcony railing so hard her knuckles turned white. She watched as the Northern Division began to move, row after row of soldiers marching toward hover transports that would carry them to their doom. Jace glanced up just before boarding his transport. For one impossible moment, their eyes met across the vast courtyard. He raised his hand in a small wave, the same gesture he'd used as a child whenever she dropped him off at school. "I can't let this happen. I can't watch him die." "Kale," she whispered, turning to find the young Zephyrian officer watching from the shadows behind them. He'd been keeping an eye on her ever since their conversation 2 days ago, though he'd made no move to report her concerns to his superiors. Now, as the last of the transports lifted off toward the mountains, his golden eyes showed the same conflict she felt. "They are gone," he said quietly. "The northern force is airborne. Even if you could convince the generals now, it would be too late to recall them." "No," Mara said, desperation making her voice crack. "There has to be something we can do. Some way to warn them before they reach the canyon." Kale studied her for a long moment. "There is one possibility. The main War Council chamber has long-range communication equipment. If someone could access it. Someone like you. Someone like us," he corrected. "I cannot enter the council chamber alone without raising suspicion. But a servant delivering late-night refreshments." He let the implication hang in the air. Lyra grabbed Mara's arm. "This is insane. If you're caught in the war room without permission, they'll execute you on the spot. And if I do nothing, Jace dies anyway," Mara replied. "Along with thousands of others." That night, long after the palace had settled into an uneasy quiet, Mara crept through the darkened corridors with a tray of wine and alien delicacies. Her heart hammered against her ribs as Kale's security codes opened door after door, leading them deeper into the palace's most restricted areas. The War Council chamber looked different in the darkness. Without the intimidating presence of the generals, it seemed smaller, almost mundane. The holographic map still floated above the central table, showing the 3-pronged attack routes in glowing detail. "There," Kale pointed to a communication console. "I can reach the field commanders, but we need proof that the route is compromised." Mara approached the map with her father's journal, comparing the holographic display to his hand-drawn charts. But as she studied the glowing lines more carefully, something else caught her attention, something that made her blood run cold. "Kale, look at these symbols," she whispered, pointing to small marks along the northern route. Do you recognize them? He leaned closer, his alien features creasing with confusion. These are not standard Zephyrian cartographic symbols. They appear to be human notations. Mara pulled out her father's journal, flipping to a page near the back where he documented various mapping symbols used by different military forces. Her hands trembled as she found a match. These marks, she said, her voice barely audible. They're human resistance codes. Someone added them to your map. The implications hit them both at the same time. This wasn't just a case of outdated information or satellite error. Someone had deliberately altered the Zephyrian battle plans, adding false route markers that would lead the Northern force directly into the destroyed canyon. But who? Kale asked. Who would have access to our strategic maps? Mara stared at the hologram, her mind racing. The Resistance couldn't have infiltrated the palace's most secure systems on their own. They would need help from the inside, someone with high-level clearance, someone trusted by the king himself. Someone who wanted the Northern assault to fail. We're not just looking at a mapping error, she whispered. We're looking at sabotage. Someone inside the palace is working with the human resistance. The war room suddenly felt much colder as the truth settled over them like a burial shroud. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when urgent war horns began blaring across the palace. Mara's heart sank as she realized what the sound meant. The Northern assault force had reached Devil's Canyon ahead of schedule. They were already walking into the trap. We have to do something now, she told Kale as they raced through the servant corridors. There's no time for subtlety. Mara, if you burst into the War Council without permission, they'll execute me, she finished. But if I don't, Jace dies, and whoever's sabotaging your army gets away with it. The grand doors of the War Council chamber stood before them, flanked by 4 alien guards with plasma rifles. Beyond those doors, she could hear the heated voices of the generals discussing battle reports. Mara clutched her father's journal against her chest and stepped forward. Halt! The lead guard raised his weapon. No humans allowed without escort. I have critical information about the Northern assault, Mara said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Lives depend on it. The guard's laugh was like grinding metal. A human servant giving military advice? Return to your duties, creature. Please, Mara begged. The Devil's Canyon route is compromised. The bridge is. Stand down or be destroyed. The plasma rifle's charge whined to life, its barrel now inches from Mara's face. But before the guard could fire, Officer Kale stepped between them. I will escort the human inside, he said calmly. She has information relevant to ongoing operations. The guards hesitated, unsure whether a junior officer had the authority to override protocol. In that moment of confusion, Mara pushed past them and burst through the doors into the council chamber. The scene inside was chaos. King Zephyr stood over the holographic map, his crystalline skin shifting between angry red and confused purple. The generals clustered around communication consoles, their voices raised in heated argument. Lost contact with the advanced scouts. Northern force reports the bridge intact. Something wrong with the terrain readings. Your Majesty! Mara's voice cut through the commotion like a blade. Every head turned toward her. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees as 6 pairs of burning eyes fixed on her small frame. King Zephyr's expression shifted from surprise to fury in less than a second. How dare you enter this chamber? General Varen snarled, stepping toward her with murder in his blue fire eyes. Guards! Remove this vermin immediately! Wait! Mara held up her father's journal. The Northern route is a trap. Your soldiers are marching toward a collapsed bridge. They're going to die. Impossible. General Korak spat. Our satellites show the bridge intact. Your satellites are wrong. Mara opened the journal, showing the detailed map with her father's careful notations. Devil's Canyon Bridge collapsed 3 years ago. Look at the date, March 15th, 2157. My father documented the rockslide. King Zephyr moved closer, his towering form casting her in shadow. You expect us to trust human scribbles over Zephyrian technology? Not just human scribbles, Mara said desperately. Look at the map more carefully. Someone added false symbols to your holographic display. Human resistance codes that don't belong in Zephyrian cartography. Someone inside the palace is sabotaging your army. The accusation hit the chamber like a thunderclap. For a moment, even the generals fell silent. Then General Varen exploded with rage. Lies! He roared, his voice shaking the walls. This is exactly what the human rebellion would do, send a spy to disrupt our battle plans with false intelligence. He strode toward Mara, his clawed hand pointing at the journal. Look at this evidence, convenient notations that just happen to contradict our mission. This creature has been working with the resistance all along. That's not true, Mara began. The timing proves it, Varen continued, his voice growing more frenzied. She appears just as our northern force reaches the canyon, spreading panic and doubt among our ranks. This is psychological warfare. General Corax nodded grimly. The human is trying to make us recall our troops, giving the rebels time to escape. I swear by my father's memory, I'm telling the truth. Mara's voice cracked with desperation. Someone with high-level access altered your maps. One of your own people is. Enough! Varen's roar drowned out her words. She accuses our own officers of treason. The creature's guilt is obvious. He turned to King Zephyr, his scarred face twisted with righteous anger. My king, this human spy must be executed immediately. Every second we delay gives the rebellion more time to coordinate their attacks. The other generals murmured agreement, but King Zephyr studied Mara with calculating eyes. After a long moment that felt like eternity, he spoke. You show remarkable bravery, little human. Few of your species would dare enter this chamber uninvited. His voice carried a note of curiosity. Tell me, if you are a rebel spy, why would you risk exposure to save Zephyrian soldiers? Because my brother is with them, Mara whispered. Jace Collins, conscripted into your 3rd Division. If the bridge is gone, he'll die with the rest of them. Something shifted in the king's alien features. You would risk your own life to save both human and Zephyrian soldiers? I would risk anything to save innocent lives, Mara replied. King Zephyr was quiet for another long moment. When he spoke again, his words sent General Varen into barely controlled fury. I am intrigued by your accusation of internal sabotage. Guard Captain, place this human in detention while we investigate her claims. If she speaks truth, she will be rewarded. If she lies, he let the threat hang unfinished. My king, Varen protested. This is exactly what the rebels want, delay and confusion. We should execute the spy now and the decision is made, King Zephyr said coldly. Investigation will begin immediately. As the guards moved to escort Mara away, she caught a glimpse of Varen's expression. What she saw there made her blood freeze, not just anger, but panic. The look of someone whose carefully laid plans were falling apart. But before the guards could reach her, Varen made a subtle gesture to his personal soldiers stationed near the back of the chamber. A gesture that meant only one thing. Kill her. Now. Kale saw it too. Mara, move! The young officer tackled her sideways just as Varen's assassins opened fire, their plasma bolts searing the air where she'd been standing. In the chaos that followed, Kale grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a maintenance panel hidden behind the king's throne. The servant tunnels, he gasped. It's the only way out. As they disappeared into the darkness beneath the palace, Mara heard Varen's voice echoing behind them. The human spy has escaped. All units terminate on sight. She must not be allowed to contact the rebellion. Now she was truly hunted, branded a traitor by the very people she tried to save. The servant tunnels beneath the palace reeked of mold and desperation. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls as Mara and Kale crawled through maintenance shafts that hadn't been cleaned since the invasion. Where are we going? Kale whispered, his alien features strained with exhaustion. Sector 7. Mara replied, pulling herself through a narrow opening. The human district. If Varen wants me dead before I can talk, there's only one place I might find allies. They emerged from a storm drain into what used to be downtown Washington, D.C. Now it was a sprawling slum where humans lived in converted ruins and makeshift shelters. The Washington Monument stood broken in the distance, its top half shattered by alien weapons during the conquest. Graffiti covered every surface, some in English, declaring, "Remember the free." Others in Zephyrian script warning of execution for human gatherings. Mara pulled her servant's hood up and led Kale through winding alleys between collapsed buildings. Here, humans moved like ghosts, keeping their heads down, avoiding eye contact, surviving another day under their alien overlords. "Mara Collins?" She spun around to find a familiar face emerging from the shadows. Davin Reed had been her neighbor before the invasion, a boy who used to play baseball in the street with Jace. Now 26, he bore the lean, scarred look of someone who'd learned to fight back. "Davin?" Mara's voice caught in her throat. "I thought you were dead." "Close enough," he replied grimly, then his eyes fixed on Kale. "Why are you traveling with one of them?" "He helped me escape from the palace. Varen tried to have me killed." Davin's expression darkened. "Varen. That name's been coming up a lot lately." He gestured for them to follow. "Come. There are too many surveillance drones here. We need to talk somewhere secure." He led them through a maze of ruined buildings to what appeared to be an abandoned subway station. But as they descended the broken escalator, Mara realized it was far from abandoned. Hidden behind collapsed sections were living spaces, communication equipment, and weapons caches. "Welcome to the real Washington, D.C., Davin said. "Population, everyone the aliens forgot to count." Other humans emerged from the shadows, men and women with the hard eyes of resistance fighters. Mara recognized some faces from the old neighborhood, people who'd supposedly died or disappeared during the early purges. "You're with the rebellion," she said, though it wasn't really a question. "What's left of it?" Davin confirmed. "Though I'm surprised to see you here, Mara. Word from the palace is that you've been branded a traitor for trying to warn the Zephyrian War Council about something." Mara studied his face carefully. "How do you know that already?" "It just happened hours ago." Davin's smile was cold as winter. "We have ways of getting information. The real question is, why were you trying to save alien soldiers?" "Because my brother is with them." Mara's voice rose in frustration. "The Northern Assault Force is marching toward a destroyed bridge. They're all going to die." "We know about Devil's Canyon Bridge," Davin said quietly. The words hit Mara like a physical blow. "You know?" "Mara, we've known about that bridge for 3 years. We've been waiting for the aliens to use that route." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "It's the perfect trap. But the map," she stammered. "Someone added human resistance codes to their holographic display. Someone altered their intelligence." Davin nodded slowly. "Someone with access to the highest levels of Zephyrian command. Someone who's been feeding us information for months." The underground chamber suddenly felt like a tomb. "You have a spy in the palace. Not just any spy," Davin continued. "Someone close to the king himself. Close enough to alter battle plans, redirect supply shipments, even influence strategic decisions." Mara's mind raced back to the War Council, to Varen's panicked expression when King Zephyr ordered an investigation, to his immediate attempt to have her assassinated rather than allow her to speak. "General Varen," she breathed. "He's working with you." "Smart girl," Davin said approvingly. "Varen approached us 6 months ago with a proposition. He provides intelligence and sabotages alien operations from within, and in return, when the rebellion wins, he gets to rule what's left of their empire. But he's one of them." Kale spoke for the first time since entering the tunnel, his golden eyes wide with shock. "He's ambitious," Davin corrected. "And he knows which way the wind is blowing. The Zephyrian occupation is failing, Kale. Resource shortages, supply line attacks, growing human resistance. Varen wants to be on the winning side when it all comes crashing down." Mara felt sick. You're using the Devil's Canyon trap to destroy an entire army. To destroy their army, Davin emphasized. Including the human conscripts they forced to fight against their own people. It's unfortunate, but war requires sacrifices. Sacrifices? Mara's voice was barely controlled fury. You're talking about my brother. About thousands of innocent people. Innocent? Davin laughed bitterly. Mara, those human conscripts chose to serve the enemy rather than resist. They made their choice. They were forced. Conscripted. They didn't choose anything. And their deaths will free millions. Davin replied coldly. When the northern force is destroyed, the aliens will lose their best soldiers and equipment. The rebellion can launch coordinated strikes across the continent. We can actually win this war. Mara stared at her childhood friend, seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. You want me to stay silent? To let them die? I want you to think about the bigger picture, Davin said. Your silence saves humanity. Your brother's sacrifice saves your species. And if I refuse? The resistance fighters around them shifted slightly, hands moving closer to weapons. Davin's expression hardened. Then you become a threat to the liberation of Earth, he said quietly. And we deal with threats the same way we deal with collaborators. Mara looked around the chamber at the faces surrounding her, people she'd once known as neighbors, now transformed into something cold and calculating. Even Kale seemed frozen with the realization of how deep the conspiracy ran. I won't let my brother die for your war, she said finally. Then I'm sorry, Mara, Davin replied. But this is bigger than one family. Bigger than one conscience. The needs of humanity outweigh your personal feelings. As the resistance fighters moved to surround her, Mara realized she was now trapped between two armies, both willing to sacrifice innocent lives for their vision of victory. Move! Kale's voice cut through the tense standoff in the underground chamber. Without warning, the young Zephyrian officer grabbed a plasma grenade from a nearby weapons cache and activated it. The rebels dove for cover as blinding light filled the tunnel, and in that moment of chaos, Kale seized Mara's hand and pulled her toward a maintenance shaft. You just made enemies of both sides, Mara gasped as they crawled through the narrow passage. Better enemies than corpses, Kale replied grimly. Varen's soldiers will be here soon. The resistance won't be able to protect you from him. They emerged into the ruins of the National Mall, where alien patrol craft circled overhead like mechanical vultures. In the distance, Mara could see the Rocky Mountains rising against the horizon. Somewhere out there, Jace was marching toward his death. We need transport, she said desperately. Something fast enough to reach Devil's Canyon before. There, Kale pointed toward a Zephyrian military compound on the edge of the slums. Cavalry mounts? If we can steal 1 inch. The alien warbeasts looked like metallic horses crossed with dragons, their silver hides gleaming and plasma conduits running along their spines. They were bred for speed and endurance, capable of crossing continents in hours rather than days. I've never ridden one of those things, Mara admitted. Neither have I, Kale said. But how hard can it be? The answer, as they discovered while stealing a mount called Terex, was extremely hard. The beast responded only to Zephyrian biosignatures, nearly trampling Mara before Kale managed to establish control. But once they were airborne, soaring across the devastated American landscape at incredible speed, Mara began to understand why these creatures were the pride of the Zephyrian cavalry. Tell me something, she shouted over the rush of wind. Why are you helping me? You're risking everything, your career, your life, probably your family's safety. Kale's expression darkened. You mentioned family. How did you know? I didn't. It was just a guess. A good guess. He guided Terex between 2 mountain peaks, following the same route the Northern Assault Force would have taken. I have a younger sister on the home world. Zara. She's about your brother's age. And? 3 weeks ago, she was arrested on charges of sedition. Apparently, she'd been asking uncomfortable questions about the war, about whether conquering Earth was truly necessary. Kale's voice was tight with emotion. General Varen personally oversaw her interrogation. Mara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What happened to her? She's alive. For now. But Varen made it clear that her continued well-being depends on my absolute loyalty to his commands. Kale's golden eyes blazed with suppressed fury. He owns me, Mara. Just like he owns you, and your brother, and everyone else caught in his web. So when you helped me escape, I chose my sister's honor over her safety. She would rather die than have her brother serve a traitor. They flew in grim silence after that, racing against time as the sun climbed toward its zenith. Below them, the landscape grew more rugged and desolate. Ancient human cities lay in ruins, overgrown with alien flora that had been seeded during the conquest. There, Kale said suddenly, pointing ahead. Devil's Canyon. Mara's heart sank as the massive gorge came into view. Where her father's map showed a bridge spanning the chasm, there was nothing but empty air and a 1,000-foot drop to jagged rocks below. The far side of the canyon showed clear signs of recent military activity, supply caches, communication towers, and defensive positions. The human resistance is already in position, she whispered. They're waiting for the northern force to march off the cliff. But as Terex circled lower, they saw something that made the situation even worse. Alien soldiers were indeed approaching the canyon from the east, but they weren't alone. Mixed in with the silver-armored Zephyrians were the smaller figures of human conscripts, including what looked like an entire company of young recruits. Jace, Mara breathed, scanning the distant figures for any sign of her brother. She climbed down from Terex onto a rocky outcropping and pulled out her father's old signal mirror, a piece of equipment Thomas Collins had taught her to use for emergency communication. If she could catch the sunlight just right, reflect it toward the approaching army. The first flash of reflected light caught the attention of the lead scouts. Mara saw them pause, point in her direction, begin to signal their confusion to the main force. It's working, she said excitedly. They're stopping too. The plasma bolt that seared past her head cut off her words. More shots followed, forcing her to dive behind the rocks as Varen's personal guard emerged from concealment, all around them. Well, well, came a familiar voice. The little human spy and her Zephyrian pet. General Varen stepped into view, his battle-scarred face twisted with cruel satisfaction. Behind him, a dozen of his most loyal soldiers kept their weapons trained on Mara and Kale. You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Varen continued conversationally. But ultimately you've served my purposes perfectly. Your purposes? Mara snarled from behind her rocky shelter. Oh yes. You see, I needed someone to blame for the coming disaster. Someone whose sabotage would explain why the northern force walked into a trap. Varen's laugh was like breaking glass. A human traitor working with resistance spies, it's the perfect cover story. You orchestrated all of this, Kale said, his voice filled with disgust. The false maps, the timing, even letting Mara escape so she'd lead us here. Brilliant, isn't it? Varen preened. When the northern army is destroyed, I'll return to the king with proof of human treachery. The surviving generals will demand harsh reprisals, mass executions, total military rule over the human population. And you'll be the one to implement it, Mara realized. Exactly. The king will have no choice but to place all Earth operations under my command. Democracy, mercy, cooperation, all of it ends today. Varen's blue eyes blazed with ambition. I will rule this planet with the iron fist it deserves. In the distance, the Northern Army had resumed its march toward the canyon, apparently dismissing Mara's signal as a false alarm. But first, Varen said, raising his sidearm, I need to eliminate the only witnesses who know the truth. Execute them both. Make it look like they died fighting each other. As Varen's soldiers moved in for the kill, Mara closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to her father's memory. She tried to save them all, alien and human alike, and she'd failed. Jace was still going to die, and now Varen would use that death to enslave humanity forever. Execute them both! Varen's command echoed across the rocky canyon as his soldiers raised their plasma rifles. But in that crucial moment, as death seemed certain, Kale proved that honor could transcend species. The young Zephyrian officer exploded into motion with the fluid grace of a warrior born. His first strike shattered the nearest soldier's weapon, sending plasma energy scattering harmlessly into the sky. His second blow sent another guard tumbling over the cliff edge with a terrified scream. "Mara, go!" Kale shouted, engaging 3 more soldiers simultaneously. She didn't hesitate. Grabbing her father's journal and signal mirror, Mara sprinted toward the canyon's edge where an old human communication tower still stood among the ruins. The rusted metal structure swayed dangerously in the mountain wind, but it was her only chance to reach the approaching army. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of fierce combat as Kale fought desperately against overwhelming odds. Plasma bolts seared the air around her as she climbed the tower's skeletal frame, her hands bleeding from the sharp metal edges. "You cannot stop destiny, little human!" Varen's voice roared from below. Mara reached the tower's apex just as the northern force crested the final hill before Devil's Canyon. Through the swirling mountain mist, she could see them clearly now, thousands of silver-armored Zephyrians, and their human conscripts, marching in perfect formation toward the missing bridge. And there, in the third row of human soldiers, she spotted Jace's familiar profile. Her father had taught her the old military signal codes when she was barely 10 years old. "Knowledge is a weapon, little star," he used to say. "And weapons should never be wasted." Now, 20 feet above the canyon floor with death closing in from all sides, Mara put that knowledge to use. She opened Thomas Collins' journal to the signal code appendix and began flashing her mirror in rapid, precise patterns. The ancient military emergency signals that had once coordinated American forces now screamed across the canyon: "Stop! Danger! Bridge out! Trap!" The lead scouts of the northern force paused, confusion rippling through their ranks like water through stone. The signals were old, nearly forgotten, but some of the veteran officers still remembered them from their pre-invasion intelligence training. Colonel Thys, commanding the advance guard, raised his clawed hand to halt the march. "What is that flashing from the canyon rim?" he demanded. "Human emergency signals, sir," reported Lieutenant Vex, consulting his tactical display. "Ancient military codes indicating danger ahead." "Impossible," scoffed Major Korath. "Humans no longer possess the organization for coordinated signals." But doubt was spreading through the ranks like wildfire. Soldiers pointed toward the tower where Mara continued her desperate signaling. The human conscripts, including Jace, began murmuring among themselves. Some of them recognized the codes too. That's when Varen arrived. The general's personal transport dropped from the sky like a falling star, disgorging him and his remaining guards onto the canyon floor. His scarred face was twisted with fury as he spotted Mara silhouetted against the sky. "Ignore the human propaganda!" Varen's amplified voice boomed across the assembled army. "This is a rebel trick designed to delay our assault. The bridge is intact. Our satellites confirm it." He pointed dramatically toward the canyon. "That signal tower is manned by resistance spies. They want us to hesitate, to give their allies time to escape." But even as Varen spoke, several junior officers were using field glasses to examine the canyon themselves. What they saw made their crystalline skin shift from confident gold to confused purple. "General," called Captain Zeth hesitantly, "I'm not detecting any bridge structure in the target area. Your sensors are malfunctioning." Varen snapped. "We march as planned." That's when Mara made her choice. Abandoning the signal mirror, she cupped her hands around her mouth and screamed with every ounce of strength in her lungs. "General Varen is a traitor! He altered the maps! He's working with the human resistance!" Her words carried across the canyon with startling clarity, reaching even the distant ranks of soldiers. A shocked silence fell over the army as thousands of pairs of alien eyes turned toward their commanding general. "The bridge collapsed 3 years ago," Mara continued, her voice cracking but determined. "Check the canyon yourself. Varen wants you to die so he can blame humans for the disaster." Varen's response was swift and desperate. "Kill her. Kill the spy before she spreads more lies." But as his soldiers raised their weapons, something unprecedented happened. Several junior officers moved to block them, their own weapons now pointed at Varen's guards. "Stand down," ordered Colonel Thys, his voice heavy with authority. "I want to examine this canyon myself before we proceed. You dare defy my direct orders?" Varen snarled. "I dare question orders that might send my soldiers to their deaths," Thys replied coldly. As tensions mounted between the factions, a new sound filled the air, the distinctive hum of the king's personal airship descending toward the canyon. The massive vessel, emblazoned with the royal crest, settled onto a rocky plateau with mechanical precision. King Zephyr emerged from the airship like an avatar of judgment, his crystalline skin shifting through the entire spectrum as he surveyed the scene. His burning gaze took in the halted army, the missing bridge, and Mara clinging to the signal tower. "Explain this delay," the king commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Varen stepped forward, his scarred face a mask of righteous indignation. "My king, human spies have infiltrated our ranks. They seek to. The human speaks truth." Kale's battered voice interrupted from the base of the tower. The young officer had somehow survived his impossible fight, though his silver armor was cracked and scored with plasma burns. "General Varen has been working with the resistance. He altered the battle maps to lead us into an ambush." "Lies!" Varen roared, his composure finally cracking completely. "I will not be accused by traitors and spies." In his fury, he made a fatal mistake. Drawing his personal sidearm, Varen spun toward King Zephyr with murder in his blazing eyes. "If I cannot rule this planet legitimately," he snarled, "then I'll take it by force." The assassination attempt might have succeeded against a lesser target. But King Zephyr hadn't conquered a planet by being slow or weak. As Varen's plasma bolt scorched the air where the king's head had been, Kale was already in motion. The young officer's blade, an ancient Zephyrian honor sword passed down through his family, caught the sunlight as it swept in a perfect arc. Varen's expression of rage transformed to shock as cold metal found his throat. General Varen, architect of treachery and would-be destroyer of worlds, collapsed onto the canyon stone with a wet gurgle, his life bleeding away into the ancient rock. In the profound silence that followed, King Zephyr looked up at Mara, still clinging to her precarious perch on the signal tower. "Come down, little human," he said quietly. "It seems we have much to discuss." As Mara began her careful descent, she saw something that filled her heart with relief. Among the human conscripts in the third row, Jace Collins was staring up at her with wonder and pride shining in his young eyes. She had saved them all, alien and human alike. But more importantly, she had honored her father's memory and proven that even the smallest voice could change the course of empires. 3 months after the Battle of Devil's Canyon, as historians would later call it, Mara Collins stood in what had once been the Oval Office, now transformed into the Royal Cartography Chamber. Holographic maps floated throughout the room like glowing constellation charts, each one meticulously verified and cross-referenced against ground surveys. Never again would outdated information lead soldiers to their deaths. Never again would false maps serve the ambitions of traitors. "The Eastern Territories survey is complete, Keeper Collins," reported Lieutenant Vex, setting down a data crystal on the central table. The young Zephyrian officer spoke with the same respect he would show any high-ranking official, a revolutionary change from just a few months ago. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Mara replied, uploading the crystal into the verification system. "Have the human reconnaissance teams confirmed the mountain pass routes?" "Yes, ma'am. All elevations match perfectly. No discrepancies." Mara nodded with satisfaction. The joint human Zephyrian survey teams had been her first official recommendation as royal keeper of maps, and they'd proven invaluable. Human knowledge of local terrain combined with Zephyrian technology created the most accurate cartographic system in the galaxy. "Keeper?" Lieutenant Vex hesitated at the chamber door. "If I may ask, how are you adjusting to your new position?" Mara smiled, remembering when such a question from an alien officer would have meant certain death for both of them. Now it was simply one colleague asking after another. "Some days I can hardly believe it's real," she admitted. Other days, I feel like this is exactly what I was meant to do. After Lieutenant Vex left, Mara walked to the great window overlooking the palace gardens. Where once only alien nobility had been permitted, humans now walked freely alongside their former oppressors. Children of both species played together in the courtyards, their laughter echoing off marble walls that had known only fear for so many years. The transformation hadn't been easy or instant. In the aftermath of Varen's treachery, King Zephyr had faced a choice: continue the failed policies of oppression or find a new path forward. Mara's courage had shown him that humans could be partners rather than just servants. The rebel strongholds had crumbled within weeks of Devil's Canyon. Davin and his resistance fighters, suddenly deprived of their inside source and facing a more cooperative alien administration, found their support evaporating among the human population. Most surrendered peacefully when offered amnesty and integration into the new order. Some, like Davin himself, had refused compromise and fled into the deep wilderness. But they were fugitives now, not freedom fighters, relics of a war that was finally ending. "Sister?" Mara turned to find Jace standing in the doorway, wearing the blue uniform of the Integrated Planetary Defense Force. At 19, he'd grown into a confident young man, though his eyes still held echoes of the frightened boy who'd watched their father die. "How was patrol?" she asked, embracing him warmly. "Quiet. The mountain settlements are prosperous, trade routes are secure, and the joint patrols are working smoothly." He grinned. "Boring, in other words. Boring is good. Boring means people are living instead of just surviving." Jace nodded, then gestured toward the holographic displays. "Any interesting discoveries today?" "Actually, yes." Mara activated a map showing the continent's mineral deposits. "The geological surveys have found significant rare earth deposits in the Appalachian region. Enough to support major industrial development. And you're going to recommend shared mining operations?" "Of course. Human knowledge of Earth geology combined with Zephyrian extraction technology. Both species benefit, either is exploited." It was the pattern that had emerged across all aspects of the new society. Integration rather than domination, cooperation rather than conquest. The chamber doors chimed, and Commander Kale entered with his usual formal bearing. His silver armor now bore the insignia of the palace guard, and his golden eyes held the confidence of someone who'd found his true calling. "Keeper Collins, the king requests your presence for the evening briefing," he announced, then his formal demeanor softened slightly. "How is Zara adjusting to Earth?" Mara smiled. "She loves the botanical gardens. I think she's cataloged every plant species on the continent." After Varen's death, Kale's sister had been released and allowed to join him on Earth, where her scientific curiosity had found fertile ground. She mentioned wanting to collaborate with human botanists on developing new crop varieties. Kale continued. "Apparently, Earth's soil has unique properties that could revolutionize agriculture on both worlds. Another bridge between our species," Jace observed. "The strongest kind," Mara agreed. As they walked toward the King's Council chamber, Mara reflected on the transformation that had swept across Earth. The integration process hadn't been perfect. There were still tensions, still those on both sides who longed for the certainty of the old hatred. But progress was being made, one small step at a time. Later that evening, alone in her chamber, Mara carefully opened her father's worn leather journal. The pages were more fragile now, yellowed with age and worn from constant reference. But Thomas Collins' precise handwriting remained as clear as the day he'd penned it. Beside the journal lay the most advanced holographic mapping system in the Zephyrian Empire, her tools for preventing future tragedies, for ensuring that accurate information would always triumph over ambition and prejudice. She placed her father's map of Devil's Canyon next to the holographic display of the same region. The old paper chart with its careful notations and the glowing three-dimensional model told the same story, truth preserved across time and technology. "I kept my promise, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "Knowledge became a weapon, and we used it to build peace instead of war." Outside her window, the lights of the integrated city sparkled like stars fallen to earth. Human and Zephyrian families lived side by side, their children growing up in a world where cooperation was normal and hatred was the exception. It hadn't been armies or politicians who'd changed the world. It hadn't been grand strategies or noble proclamations. It had been a poor human waitress who'd spotted a small detail that powerful generals had missed. Mara closed the journal and prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new maps to verify, new bridges to build between worlds, and new proof that sometimes, the smallest details decide the fate of empires.